You believe being good is enough to survive this world. That showing up, playing fair, and keeping your head down will somehow protect you from the chaos that surrounds you. But I want you to stop and really look around. Look at who gets stepped on, who gets ignored, who gets torn apart the moment they show a single crack. It's not the cruel. It's not the arrogant. It's the soft ones, the kind ones, the understanding ones, the ones who think the world will love them for being nice. Machiavelli would tell you, if you're not ruthless, you're not ready. And when the world comes for you, and it will, you'll either break or you'll become ruthless. That's the choice. That's the war. And it's already happening. Most people never even realize that this choice was placed before them because it never feels like a choice. It feels like betrayal. The first time someone takes advantage of your silence. The first time someone mistakes your kindness for weakness. The first time you sit there wondering how someone could do that to you after everything you did for them. And slowly, it starts to eat at you. That sharp little voice that says maybe you're the fool. That maybe all your goodness is costing you everything. But instead of listening, you double down. You try to be even more gentle, even more forgiving, hoping that if you just prove your worth, someone, anyone, will finally treat you right. But the world doesn't reward purity. It rewards power. And power, as Machiavelli made clear, isn't about how much love you can gather. It's about how much damage you can endure without losing control. The powerful do not beg, they do not explain, and they never allow anyone to define them by anything but their own strength. Because in a world that constantly tests your limits, every time you let something slide, you're teaching people how to hurt you better next time. Here's the trap. Everyone wants to believe they're the exception, that they can be good and still be strong, that they can keep giving without running dry. And it works until it doesn't. Until one day, you're the one staying up at night, trying to understand why the people you helped are the ones sabotaging you. Why your loyalty is repaid with betrayal. Why the people you defended are the ones whispering behind your back. You'll go through every rational explanation. Maybe they're insecure. Maybe they didn't know better. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. But what you won't admit, what's too painful to face, is that they did it because they could. Because there was no consequence. Because they didn't fear what you might do. Fear, that's the word no one wants to talk about. But fear is the silent currency of every relationship. Not terror, not cruelty, but that quiet, unspoken awareness that crossing you comes with a price. And if you don't have that, if your presence doesn't carry weight, you'll spend your life being used, overlooked, and discarded the moment you're no longer convenient. People love to romanticize the idea that you can win others over with your heart alone. But love without respect turns into pity. And pity is just the slowest form of contempt. The moment you understand that, everything changes. You stop asking why people hurt you. You stop making excuses for them. You stop begging the world to play fair. And you start doing what Machiavelli demanded, what reality demands. You stop living on hope. You start building leverage. Leverage isn't loud. It's not about domination or control. It's about being undeniable. It's knowing that you have something, strength, clarity, discipline, that no one can manipulate. That when someone tries to take from you, they'll regret it. That you're not afraid to walk away. That your silence isn't weakness, it's warning. But here's the uncomfortable truth. To build that kind of presence, you have to let parts of yourself die. The parts that crave approval. The parts that need to be understood. The parts that still believe fairness will save you. You have to kill the illusion that people will change if you just love them harder. They won't. They change only when they realize you won't tolerate being disrespected. And most people aren't ready for that. Because being ruthless comes with a cost. You'll be misunderstood. Labeled cold. Too intense. Too distant. But that's the price of being unbreakable. See, being ruthless isn't about cruelty. It's about clarity. Knowing what you will and will not accept. Knowing when to walk away and when to strike. Knowing that sometimes mercy is the weapon that gets you killed. And you won't learn this from books. You'll learn it the day someone betrays you and still expects you to stay. You'll learn it when you finally say no, and they look at you like you've committed a crime. Because people who are used to your self-sacrifice will always call your boundaries selfish. That's how you know you've drawn the line right. Machiavelli never told us to become monsters. He told us to become unshakable, to understand that if you want to survive in a world built on dominance, you can't show up as prey. You must become the kind of person who doesn't flinch when things get ugly. The kind of person who can sit in the fire and not scream. The kind of person who doesn't chase closure, doesn't need apologies, doesn't need everyone to see their side. Because when you become truly ruthless, not out of hate but out of necessity, you finally become free. You don't need anyone to understand you. You only need them to know they can't break you. That's where everything shifts. When you stop trying to be understood and start becoming undeniable. When your silence begins to carry more weight than someone else's shouting. When people start adjusting their tone the moment you walk into the room. Not because you ask them to, but because your presence leaves no room for games. That's the Machiavellian way. Not noise, not drama, just presence. Presence built on control. And control built on knowing that at any moment you can burn the whole thing down and walk away without hesitation. But this can't be faked. You can't pretend to be ruthless. The world will test you. It will push, insult, reject, and provoke you just to see if you fold. And if you do, even once, even slightly, you confirm what they already suspected. That your strength is performance. That your confidence is borrowed. That beneath it all, you're just like the rest. But when you don't fold, when you meet insult with silence, betrayal with indifference, and pressure with precision, something changes. The same people who once doubted you start fearing your disappointment. Not because you're cruel, but because you've shown them you don't need them. Needing nothing from anyone is the most dangerous position you can be in. Because when you don't need, you can choose. You can walk away without hesitation. You can negotiate without begging. You can lead without seeking approval. And people feel that. They feel it the way animals sense an alpha. Something primal, something silent, something that can't be imitated with words or titles. It's earned, and it's felt in the smallest gestures. A look, a pause, a refusal to react. That's the art of becoming ruthless. Not loud, not showy, but deliberate. The kind of ruthlessness that doesn't destroy everything, only the illusions that make you weak. And once those illusions die, you begin to see the world as it truly is. Not cruel, not fair, just real. And in that reality, everyone is playing a game, whether they admit it or not. Some play to survive, some play to dominate. But the ones who win, they play to outlast. And to outlast, you must harden. Not once, not just after one betrayal. But again and again, until strength isn't a mask you wear, it's a skin you've grown. That doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means your feelings stop controlling your decisions. You still care, but with boundaries. You still love, but with discernment. And most importantly, you still give, but only to those who have earned it. That's the difference between the broken and the ruthless. The broken keep giving to prove they're good. The ruthless give because they choose to, not because they fear being seen as bad. Machiavelli understood that power was never about being feared for no reason. It was about being respected because you could have chosen revenge, but didn't. Because you could have destroyed someone, but walked away instead. That kind of restraint terrifies people more than any threat. Because it proves you're not reacting, you're choosing. And anyone who chooses, when others react, controls the entire dynamic. But you can't reach that level if you still flinch at rejection. If you're still explaining yourself to people who never listen. If you're still trying to prove your worth to those who profit from your self-doubt. The moment you realize that someone not valuing you isn't a problem, it's a filter, you begin reclaiming your power. Not through revenge, but through removal. Silence becomes your sharpest weapon. Distance your defense. Detachment your armor. And the beauty of it all is how quiet it becomes. No arguments, no dramatic farewells. No need for the last word. Just the sound of you moving on. No announcement, no explanation. Just absence. A void that speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. And the world notices. Because in a culture addicted to validation and constant noise, the one who doesn't chase stands out. The one who walks away from chaos calmly without needing applause. That's the person people remember. Because they represent something rare. Power without noise, authority without arrogance, discipline without display. But there's a paradox here you must understand. The more ruthless you become, the more tempted you'll be to abandon your humanity altogether, to grow cold just to feel in control. But that's not the goal. The goal isn't to lose your heart. It's to protect it so fiercely that only the worthy ever reach it. You don't want to become a monster. You want to become untouchable without losing your soul. And how do you do that? You keep your principles but stop announcing them. You set boundaries but enforce them quietly. You give trust, but in small doses, slowly, while watching everything. And you stop expecting people to treat you the way you treat them. That expectation is the seed of suffering. Once you let it go, you stop feeling betrayed by behavior that was predictable all along. You stop giving people the power to shock you. And when no one can shock you, no one can break you. Most people live trapped in a loop of hope and disappointment. They enter relationships hoping to be seen, only to be ignored. They open up hoping to be understood, only to be rejected. And each time they shrink a little more. They either turn bitter or they break. But you don't have to choose either. There's a third path. You become strategic. You start watching more than you speak, listening more than you explain. And instead of handing people the script they'll use to hurt you, you hand them nothing. Let them guess. Let them project. Let them underestimate you. It's all leverage. Because the more unpredictable you become, the more powerful your presence gets. People don't fear what they fully understand. They fear what they can't read. The unknown, the unreadable, the unbothered. And when you carry yourself with that quiet, calculated distance, you become a mystery. Not by pretending to be someone else, but by finally breaking the habit of oversharing, over-explaining, and over-apologizing. You begin to see that the less you explain, the more respect you command. This isn't about playing games. It's about understanding them so you're never a pawn again. Because life will test you through people. The ones who flatter you, the ones who challenge you, the ones who claim to love you until you say no. Each one teaches you something different. How to hold your power, how to resist bait, how to keep your emotions yours and not theirs. And the more you master that, the calmer you become. Your peace becomes sacred, your time expensive, and people begin to notice that not everyone gets access to you anymore. Not because you're cruel, but because you've already paid the price for being too open too soon, too often, and now you're done bleeding for people who never bring bandages. You learn to study a person's patterns, not their promises, their silences, not their speeches. You stop being impressed by potential and start valuing consistency. And slowly the world begins to look different, less like a battlefield and more like a chessboard. And you become a player who already knows how it ends, because you're 10 moves ahead. And you've already made peace with walking away the moment the game turns foolish. You don't flinch. You don't chase. You don't defend. You just stay unshaken, unreadable, and fully in control. Because you've learned that power isn't just about what you can do, it's about what you can resist doing. It's about knowing your hand could destroy someone and choosing not to move it. That's where the fear begins. That's where the respect grows. Because true power doesn't come from rage, it comes from restraint, from silence, discipline, and self-possession. That's what makes people question themselves before they ever question you. You either break or you build this version of yourself. The version that doesn't beg for fairness, but creates balance. That doesn't demand loyalty, but observes it. That doesn't shout boundaries, but lives them. A version of you that no longer needs the world to be good, because you've become strong enough to face it exactly as it is. And when that happens, you become something the world doesn't know how to handle. Someone who doesn't crumble under betrayal. Someone who doesn't beg for closure. Someone who doesn't lose their mind when things fall apart. Because you've already rebuilt yourself from worse. And nothing can take that away from you. You either break or you become ruthless. And once you choose the latter, you never go back. Not because you're bitter, but because you finally know your worth, and you'll never again let the world decide it for you. Here's what no one tells you. Once you step into that ruthless version of yourself, everything changes. The way people look at you, the way they talk to you, the way they hesitate before testing your limits. They may not understand what's changed, but they feel it. You're not louder, you're not crueler, you're just sharper, like a blade hidden behind calm eyes. And people instinctively pull back from sharp things. That's presence, that's power. Because now you're not moving through life asking for anything. You're evaluating. Does this person bring clarity or confusion? Does this situation make you stronger or weaker? And if the answer leans toward chaos, you cut it off. Clean, quick, quiet. No guilt, no second chances. Because you've learned something vital. Not everything deserves to stay just because it once made you feel good. Machiavelli called this strategic cruelty, not in action, but in selection. Ruthlessness isn't only about how you handle enemies. It's about how you choose your allies, who you allow close, who gets to hear your fears, who gets to see your flaws. And if you're still letting people in just because they ask nicely, you haven't stepped into your full power yet. Being ruthless means no one is grandfathered into your life, not because you're cold, but because you've realized peace is worth more than loyalty from the wrong people. Most people cling to relationships because they fear starting over. But you're no longer afraid of emptiness. You've made peace with solitude. You've sharpened yourself in the silence. And that makes you dangerous. Because a person who isn't afraid to be alone is a person who can't be manipulated by loneliness. That's why the world tries so hard to keep you soft. It tells you forgiveness makes you noble. That understanding everyone's pain makes you wise. And yes, those things matter until they start costing you your boundaries. Until they turn you into someone who tolerates everything just to be seen as good. But there's nothing noble about being walked over. Nothing wise about accepting disrespect in the name of compassion. At some point, you have to stop mistaking your ability to endure pain as proof of your worth. Pain is not a currency. And if you keep treating it like one, you'll keep attracting people who expect you to pay in suffering. So you make a new decision. No more over-explaining. No more begging to be understood. No more giving endless chances just because you're afraid of being called harsh. You cut through the noise. You state your boundaries once and let your actions enforce them. You don't teach people how to treat you through words. You teach them through consequences. And the moment someone learns that crossing you isn't just unpleasant, but unrewarding, they stop. And those who don't, they fade away on their own. Not because you push them, but because they realize they can no longer take what they used to. And that's exactly how it should be. Let them go. In fact, Machiavelli would advise, let them believe they're leaving by choice. That's the strategy. Never force. Just make resistance so draining that surrender feels like relief. But don't confuse this with manipulation. This is psychological precision. It's the discipline of not wasting energy convincing anyone of anything. It's understanding that not everyone earns access to your full self. That sometimes silence is the loudest proof of power. Because once people sense that you're not emotionally dependent on them, their masks slip. The games become visible. The manipulation becomes transparent, and you begin to make decisions based on truth, not illusion. That's the beauty of being ruthless. You stop falling for performance. You see people as they are and respond accordingly. And then your world simplifies. Fewer conversations, but deeper ones. Fewer connections, but cleaner ones. Less chaos, more clarity. Less noise, more focus. And in that calm, in that calculated stillness, your power begins to breathe. Some will try to guilt you for changing. They'll say you've grown cold, distant, unrecognizable. And they're right, you have. You had to. Because the version of you they remember was drowning in noise, in overthinking, in emotional debt that was never repaid. You used to shrink to keep others comfortable. Now you expand unapologetically. You used to bend until you broke. Now you let things break before you even think of bending. And if that unsettles them, let them squirm. You weren't born to be pleasing. You were born to be powerful. You weren't made to be soft enough to mold. You were made to be solid enough to stand. And the moment you accept that, you stop living in defense. You stop anticipating who will misunderstand, who will gossip, who will leave. You stop chasing safety and start building strategy. Because here's what you finally grasp. People don't respect good hearts, they respect firm results. They don't follow kindness, they follow clarity. And if you keep leading with softness in a world that bows to strength, you'll be devoured. But when you reverse the order, lead with strength, then reveal your softness only to the deserving, that's when everything shifts. Because then your compassion has authority, your kindness has edges, your yes holds weight because you're not afraid to say no. That's what real power looks like. Not loud, not cruel, not for show, but quiet, steady, undeniable. The kind of power that changes the air in a room without a single word. People can feel it, the absence of need, the presence of self. They can sense you've built yourself alone, brick by bleeding brick. You either break or you build this inner fortress. One thought, one rejection, one boundary at a time, until there's nothing left the world can threaten. Because you've already faced the worst, the loss of yourself. And now you've returned, sharper, stronger, scarred, but unafraid. That version of you doesn't negotiate with disrespect. It doesn't explain to those who refuse to understand. It doesn't force itself into places it's outgrown. It walks alone, not in pride, but in peace, in clarity, in quiet confidence that you no longer need to prove anything because you already proved it to yourself. And that's enough. You reach a stage where silence becomes your statement, where stillness carries more weight than argument, where the conflicts people invite you into seem beneath you. Not because they're small, but because you've outgrown reaction. That's what ruthlessness truly is. It doesn't make you heartless. It makes you untouchable. You stop pouring energy into every slight, every rumor, every false smile, concealing a knife. You stop analyzing betrayal. You no longer need to know why. It's enough to know it happened. That realization is your permission to leave. No fight, no farewell. Just absence, clean, complete, and final. That's what power looks like. The power to disappear, not out of weakness, but decision. The kind of decision that terrifies the world. Because when you no longer react, you become the one who controls every outcome. You decide who gets access. You don't react to disrespect. You decide what energy deserves your attention. You don't react to being underestimated. You use it. Because now being overlooked is leverage. They won't see you coming, and by the time they do, it's already too late. Machiavelli understood that those who announce their power rarely possess it. The most dangerous people stay silent until it's time not to be. They let others talk, they let others assume. And then they move, not to wound, but to end the game completely. One strike. No comeback, no apology, just finality. That's the true edge of ruthlessness, not chaos, but precision. And you gain that precision by unlearning everything that made you soft. You stop thinking you owe people anything just because of shared history. You stop chasing validation from conversations that drain you. You stop lowering your standards just because someone's potential looks promising. You stop handing out discounts on your energy. Because here's the truth. When you were broken, you tolerated things the real you never would. You laughed at jokes that stung. You nodded at people who disrespected you. You stayed in friendships that felt more like rivalries. You maintained peace by sacrificing your own. And you wore that as armor, believing if you stayed kind enough, small enough, agreeable enough, the world would finally stop striking. But it never did. Because the world doesn't retreat when you surrender. It retreats when you stop feeding it. When you fight back with silence, with standards, with distance. That's what you've learned now. You don't fight fire with fire. You smother it. You take away the oxygen, the attention, the reaction, the emotional fuel, and suddenly the flames die. That's real control. And it terrifies those who once lived off your reactions. So now you keep your circle small, your priorities smaller. You don't broadcast your vision anymore. You build quietly. You move with precision. And when people ask what you're working on, you give them just enough to confuse them, never enough to prepare them. Because not everyone deserves front-row seats to your evolution. And when you do open up, it's no longer out of need but out of choice. Because you've stopped bleeding for people who never brought bandages. You've stopped confiding in listeners who only collect ammunition. You've stopped asking to be understood by those never meant to walk beside you. That's the core of ruthlessness, not cruelty but self-loyalty. It's realizing that protecting your peace is worth being misunderstood, that walking away is better than being tolerated, that your standards aren't too high, they're just too costly for the wrong crowd. And that's when the internal shift becomes visible. People start noticing the silence, the stillness, the lack of apology for existing as you are. They call it ego. They call it coldness. They call it selfish. But they'll never again call it weak. And you don't need to correct them. Let them speak. Let them assume. Let them speculate. Because while they talk, you're building, quietly, steadily, like a storm forming beyond their sight. Because your goal now isn't to be liked. It's to be undeniable. To be so rooted in who you are that nothing moves you. Not flattery, not insults, not empty promises, and definitely not fear. That's when you become untouchable. Because you've stopped seeking permission and started mastering precision. You talk less. You watch more. You move smarter. You stop explaining your process to people who've never created anything. You stop asking opinions from spectators. You stop dimming your fire for those still lost in the dark. And you realize most people aren't uncomfortable because you changed. They're uncomfortable because they didn't. And the deeper you go, the more peace you find in the quiet. Not loneliness, but solitude. Not isolation, but independence. You realize you don't need the crowd. You just need direction. You don't need noise. You need motion. And you don't need anyone's belief because you already have your own. That's the moment the old you dies. The one who over-explained, over-apologized, waited, hoped, begged to be seen. That version gets buried under every moment you chose discipline over distraction, boundaries over comfort, purpose over approval. And from that burial rises something else. Not louder, not flashier, but sharper, clearer. A version of you that doesn't flinch at loss, doesn't panic when alone, doesn't shake in uncertainty, because you've already fought your greatest enemy, your own doubt. And you didn't just survive it. You turned it into armor, into clarity, into the force that made you unbreakable. You either break or you become ruthless. And once you taste what it's like to choose yourself completely, not out of spite, but out of strength, you never go back. You never trade silence for noise again. You never hand out explanations to those who never earned them. You never shrink to make others feel tall. And most importantly, you never again let the world define you. Because now, finally, you do. Every boundary, every move, every step on your own terms.